Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we are going to be talking about how to make friends. Yes, sometimes that can be hard after, high school or college. You're in the real adult world. It can make it harder to make friends. Absolutely. So, Donovan, what are your initial thoughts about how to make friends?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of that a lot of these friendships, like you were talking about, these early friendships are sort of forged out of spending a lot of time with people
Mhm.
around something that you have shared interests, right? So, in high school or college, like you have a lot of classes with people, or you're going to a lot of social events, and also a lot of people's time is structured in a way that they can spend a ton of time with friends. Right now, there are also cases where you're taking a ton of classes and you also have to work and whatever else, and maybe you don't have as much. But in general, you kind of like cram together with these people a lot and a lot of different people, right? Because you're taking different classes over the course of different semesters, or like in high school, you rotate through different classes. So you interact with a broad pool of people
Right.
on a regular basis.
Right.
And I feel like that's an absolutely fertile place to start making friends. And then after that, I know I had this experience. I know it's common for other people, but once I sort of started moving into the working world, my job was more static in the sense that people came and left less often. I worked with less people, right? Like a smaller group of maybe 10 people that I worked with on a regular basis, as opposed to 30 times however many classes.
Mhm.
And so I found that over time, those new sort of friendships that sparked up didn't come as naturally. And I'm sure this is some of the stuff that we'll talk about, but I have found that since then, I have to be more sort of mindful about the way that I try to make friends. But I don't think I don't think it's like really like an age related issue, right? I think it's just a part of life or structure of life issue, because when I did my boot camp, which was super intensive, and I spent 10 hours a day with the same people 6 days a week, and it was a fairly large group, I made a bunch of friends out of that. So those are some of my initial thoughts around just like the structure of why friendships are easier to make earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I do agree that when you're in an environment or a community or some sort of like group where you're stuck together for a long while, you tend to make friends out of that. And, I do have some high school friends that I'm still in touch with. I have some college friends that I'm still in touch with. But honestly, one of the most intense experiences that I've gone through is medical school. And I'm still very close, even though it's been 10 years since I completed my medical program. I'm still even though we're also spread out across the country, from Seattle to Alaska to the East Coast. It's like we still stay in touch because we had to spend lots of hours together. We were in Sunday groups together. We had to rely on each other to survive that intense program. And that has built such long, deep friendships. I just texted my best friend from med school yesterday when I was dealing with something. And the other thing, though, I think is important. It's like it is absolutely harder after school to make friends, but I think you have to take a more proactive approach. You said mindful. I would like to add the term like proactive, and it's not just going to naturally occur typically as it does in high school or college, where you're just around these people, you're in their class, you're hanging out at lunch together. Whereas, maybe if you're in a work environment, for one, it depends on if you're working remote or not, because a lot of us are working remote, as am I. It's harder. It's like, I don't have anyone to go out to lunch with. So it's a little bit different. And I have to kind of suggest going out with people like outside of our normal time that we spend together. So I am fortunate though, when I moved to California 3 years ago, I did do another intensive thing in a small group of people called the Introduction Leaders Program. So it's a leadership program. I think we started at like 14 people in our group, and then it kind of dwindled down to like 6 people because it was pretty hardcore and intense. But those 6 ladies I'm very, very close with. And I'm still friends with them today. And it's nice to know that we spent so much time together and that we had each other's back. And there was like I think another part of deepening friendships is having to like go through something intense together and having to kind of rely on each other to some degree, or have each other's back and support each other through that intense experience, kind of builds the connection a little bit more. And so I felt that from that experience and have made such great friendships. But even with the pandemic, I think I kind of became passive. And well, part of it was the pandemic, and I wasn't trying to like get out and meet up with people. So we did maybe like a couple Zoom calls together, but eventually that kind of fell to the wayside. But it really took like a concerted effort for me to be like, oh, now that the pandemic is like, oh, now we can go out to restaurants again. I haven't seen a friend in a really long time. Maybe I need to ask someone. Nobody is asking me. So I have to be that person to do that, to instigate. And I'm okay with that, but it does take a little bit more effort.
That's one thing that I really want to pick up and run with, which is there's an idea that I've seen from a lot of people around like, well, my friend didn't message me, so I guess they don't want to hang out. And if you have a mindset like that, then especially as you move past sort of school and into other things, you are very likely to see a lot of your ties sort of dissolve if you are not making an effort or doing things proactively. Because I am sure what happens a lot is there are 2 people on each end of that exact same mindset, both going, well, this person didn't reach out to me, so they don't want to hang out. So if you can be the person to actually move plans forward, or to suggest things, or continually invite people out and make that sort of part of just the way you operate, then that is going to serve you far better. Because I've been on both sides of it. I've been the person who's just sitting around waiting for someone to message me or invite me to something. And, things do come through here and there. But when you're the one driving the social engagements, it's much easier to continually keep those ties alive. And I will also say, for, going back to in school and whatnot, you have just like a constant stream of new people. One of the easiest ways that you can recreate that is by continually like inviting people or meet to things that you're doing that it seems like would overlap, because by adding those shared experiences, then you can sort of deepen that friendship in a way that's not as difficult for most people as probably like going out of your way to do something with a specific person to try to be their friend.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually, I think, a really good point you made that I thought of. You also have to be a person that goes out and does stuff, regardless of if someone joins you or not. Like, just make plans anyways. And maybe friends can join, maybe friends won't. You can just be like, hey, I'm going on this hike on X day at this time. Are you free? And if that friend's like, no, I got plans, go on to another friend. And if they are like, I got plans too, go on to another friend, or maybe plan out a little farther in advance. And then that gives it more time so people can be available to join in on that activity. I think that can make a difference for sure.
I also think it's really important to not get caught up on if people are busy, because
it's like that's part of life. Yeah.
Because as you move from sort of this like, younger school age to more adult responsibilities and stuff, most people are much busier than they were in the past. Most people are working more or have more obligations or other things. That's another thing that I've noticed and had to sort of change my expectations, right?
Right.
People have a lot more things to do, so it's more likely that they're going to be busy.
Right.
And at school age,
Mhm.
sometimes that was an indication of like,
Yeah.
oh, they just don't want to hang out.
Right.
But more and more, especially as people like mature and and are able to actually communicate
Right.
reasonably,
Mhm.
a lot of times people are just busy, and that doesn't mean they don't want to be your friend or don't want to hang out or whatever else. But again, I've seen the same thing: people getting really discouraged because it's like, oh, well, I invited them to this, and they were busy both times, so I don't think they want to hang out. But I've found or experienced, right, both sides, inviting the same person to multiple things
Mhm.
until they're finally like, oh yeah, that does align with my schedule, awesome. Or me being like, I'm busy, can't do that, can't do
Mhm.
that. Please invite me to the next one, can't do that.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of times those people drop off, but the people who were consistent, at some point the schedules did align.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. Sometimes it takes some planning. And if there's someone specific that you want to go on a hike with or whatever activity that you're going to do, it's like, okay, let's hop on a quick call and like pull out our calendars, and maybe it has to be 4 months in advance because we got so much going on, but it can happen. The other thing, it's like I want people to actually, if they have a plan to go on a hike and then nobody's available to join them, I want them to do the hike anyways, because it's like, hey, you're getting out there. It's not affecting you and not feeling discouraged just because nobody could join you for that hike. And it's like, keep putting it out there. Like part of me is like, okay, actually I used to do this when I was single and was dating, because I was so busy, and I would put out like a spontaneous date challenge, because I was like, oh, I just got off work early. I I'm free for the evening. I have no plans. I have no date. I'm just gonna message like 5 guys and see if anyone's available right now to meet me up for a drink. And I actually made a good friend out of that. We didn't date, but he actually didn't tick me up on my challenge the first time I tried it, because he had plans. But he was like, "Oh, but I appreciate this idea, and hit me up the next time you do this challenge." And I was like, "Okay." And so I did, and he was able to join, and I was like, "Oh, that worked out pretty cool." And oh, actually, it's his birthday. I got a reminder that popped up. I need to go text him to say happy birthday to him. But yeah, part of it is like, putting it out there, but just doing. I was gonna go out for that drink, but on my own, even if nobody could join me. But on the other side of it, I want to say like, yeah, if there is someone you want to spend time with, you know, be more diligent about planning in advance, even if that takes a little bit more time. Um, the other thing I wanted to comment on and share from my own personal experience, there's like a pro and con of sometimes sending out a text to a group, like if you're in a group text, like on WhatsApp or something like that. Sometimes it's like nobody responds to that, and not to take it personally. Texting people individually, I'm more likely to get a response. So I stopped well, no, I mean, I still do group texts, but I just stopped expecting people to like, oh, not 100% of the people responded to my inquiry of going on a hike on X day. How dare they? They don't like me. I let go of that because I get people are busy. And I do this too. I'm guilty of not responding to a group message because I like get caught up in life. I don't think that they're like waiting on me or anything like that to respond. So I just like I don't reply because I know I already can't make it or something like that. But on the flip side, sometimes like putting it out in my group, like my girls that I made friends with from my leadership program, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, it's been forever since we've gotten dinner together. Let's get dinner one of these nights. And then I don't just say one of these nights and just leave it at that. I like put out a few date options and like, okay, who's available? I don't expect 100% of the people to be available, but usually people will be like, oh, I'm available on this date, but not this date, but not this date. And so figuring out of those dates, which one like the majority of the group can join in is what we settle on. And yeah, sometimes that's helpful. So that's what I wanted to put out as far as like group messaging, and having no expectations, just putting it out there, seeing what happens.
Well, I will say for groups, for individuals, for friends, for dating, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
If you're trying to organize something or get together for something, you putting out a date and time
Mm-hmm.
and specific activity is going to be
Yeah.
far more effective than the sort of like, we should hang out. Because I've done this, I've seen it a million times. What happens is it just sort of sits in this ethereal limbo state
Right.
where it's like, oh yeah, we should do this. Okay.
Mhm.
And never materializes. So
Right.
you are far more likely to have success in meeting up with people in general if you say like, I was thinking of going to a movie on Thursday at 7.
Mhm.
Do you want to come? Whether that's a group or an individual, because then it starts the conversation around the actual tangible pieces of it, right? And maybe you check the activity first depending on who it is or whatever, like but having that makes it so much better. And if you think about it from the receiving end, if somebody sends you a message and is like, do you want to go do this specific thing at this time, then it's very easy to say yes or no, or offer an alternative time where you're actually available. And this I learned this from dating, but it is true for friends as well. It's just so much more likely to culminate in some sort of activity.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely for dating, where it's like, yeah, let's get a drink, and then nobody ever suggests a time, and so it never happens. And I'm like, come on, let's make it happen. I was diligent because I was annoyed by that. I would suggest times because it's like I'm busy, so I only have X amount of times open. So these it almost gave me a little more like power in a way to put out the times, because it's like I only have so much availability. So, I want to find a time that works for me, obviously.
I do think that's something that holds people up, which is the opposite, where
Mhm.
they aren't really hanging out with anyone or dating or
Yeah.
whatever the context is. They do have a lot of free time, so they have tons of flexibility around.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
oh, we could go at this time
Oh,
or this time or
whenever.
this time or this time or this time. It doesn't matter. And I think that's one of the most common ways to get stuck in this trap of like, oh, we should do this. And it's like, I can just go whenever. So let me know. And it's like, okay. And then
Right.
they never finish that. So I would
Right.
say, even if you do have a ton of free time,
Yeah.
still just pinpoint into some random
Mhm.
specific time, because then you can sort of it sounds way more formal than it is, but like open negotiations there, right? Like you can
Right.
start
Land on
drilling
something.
into what is actually going to work, whereas the more nebulous stuff tends to just not materialize.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree. I do kind of want to switch gears because I was just thinking about how to make not just friends, but like better friends or deeper connection friends. And so I think that's an area I'd want to explore a little bit, because it's like, yeah, we have our work friends. Sometimes I make a deeper connection with them. Sometimes I just see them at work and I'm just friendly with them and we never hang out outside of work. So but there are like, I think of like past jobs where I have made work friends, which actually isn't that common. It really took like our personalities had to mesh enough. We had to talk enough, and someone like had to instigate like a hangout, and then it kind of started to snowball into more hangouts. And so one of the things I think helps is if you share personal stories, and if once it feels more appropriate and as you're getting to know each other, to actually be vulnerable and like share deeper stuff about yourself. And that tends to open up them to feel safe and comfortable enough to share a little more about their lives and things that they've dealt with or struggled with in life. And that might be like, oh wow, those are more interesting conversations. And then you could be, oh, let's hang out outside of work or outside of whatever context that we met, so we can continue this conversation further.
Yeah, I think that's basically exactly what you have to do, right? You have to start taking risks in a way that exposes some level of vulnerability. Now, that doesn't mean like you trust them with your life on the first day you meet them or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But by, if you think about any of the deep friendships you have,
Mhm.
It's people who know you really well and that you're comfortable sharing at least the majority of your life with, or like
Mhm.
exposing the majority of your life to. And the only way to get there is through sort of this process of like, okay, you have to keep meeting new people. If you're not meeting new people, you can't make new friends.
Mhm.
Once you meet the people, you have to spend enough time with them to have the opportunities to expose different parts of what you care about. And when I say vulnerabilities, I don't mean like these are my weaknesses, but I mean like these are the things that are important to me, or
Yeah.
here are parts of my story that maybe you
Mhm.
don't just share with someone right
Mhm.
at the get-go. And
Right.
then also give the other person space to do the same.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that has tripped me up in the past is, as an adult, trying to meet new people and thinking like, oh, well, once I find someone who's going to be my friend, things will just click and it'll be supernatural and everything will flow from there. And
Mhm.
while that's still a possibility, the likelihood of it, because I don't meet nearly as many people as I used to,
Mhm.
the instances where the chemistry between us is going to be like extremely high right out the gate
Yeah.
is just way less common.
Yeah.
So I have to give more opportunities to people and see how the relationship develops. Because I think
Mhm.
there's another piece of people, meeting new people as an adult, feeling like, oh, like we're kind of friendly, but we're not exactly the same, and the chemistry wasn't like 5,000%. So I don't really want to hang out with them again, which is fine. Personal choice. You can kind of decide where you want to put that line, but most friendships have to develop over time and multiple instances. So I've learned to be more open to spending time with people to sort of feel out how the relationship develops or get to know more about them. Because if I
Mhm.
think about myself and how I'm presenting myself when I'm meeting new people, as opposed to how I present myself in my deepest relationships,
Mhm.
it's not the same thing, right? There's a gap of sort of understanding and mutual agreement and whatever else that allows me to feel more comfortable exhibiting some of these other things. So I just wanted to share out that for me, it made a big difference giving the relationships that I start more space to
Mhm.
expand before I just write it off as like, we're not best friends, so whatever, I'm out of here.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. Like some of those work friends that I have made from past jobs, it was like 6 months to a year before we actually hung out outside of the work context. And so it's like, yeah, built up over like stories and time. It wasn't like, yeah, I mean, it could have happened sooner if I felt like inclined to instigate the hangout, but sometimes you just don't know how your personalities are going to mesh. You got to, get to know each other a little better. And you kind of are forced to anyways because you see each other here and there throughout work or whatever context that you're in. But yeah, it can grow and it can take time. I do also want to say that, as far as like how to find friends in the current day and age, it does help to have like a shared activity of some sort. Like I know some people like, oh, let's join a band or let's join a sports team where we can interact with people. And those people I'm like, yeah, I'm not instantly friends with them. Let's hang out right away or let's go do a class together. It's like maybe I have to be a part of it for a while before I'm like, okay, yeah, let's hang outside of this sports thing or whatever we might be doing.
Yeah, 100% agree. If you can find some sort of a community with an interest that overlaps with something you have,
Hmm.
that is going to be one of the easiest gateways into making more friends.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a lot, but I've moved a bunch of times the last couple of years,
Hmm.
and I've played soccer pretty much everywhere that I've gone.
Yeah.
And for me, it's one of those keys that makes it really easy to just open up and immediately have some amount of community in just about any place.
Hmm.
So if you can get comfortable with sort of going into these groups with an interest, and sports is kind of hard because a lot of it, or at least
Yeah.
soccer, is like
A
continuous
lot of
running, so there's
talking.
not a
A
lot
lot of
of
talking
yeah.
in it. Right.
uh, but in general,
Right.
it opens up space to sort of start these relationships, and it goes back to sort of this initial issue that I've talked about as being an adult. You just don't get introduced to that many new people. You just don't meet that many new people. So if you can find a group or a community, then that
Mhm.
inherently increases the number of people you're exposed to. It increases the chances that you find someone who you can actually be good friends with.
Yeah, absolutely. Although just going back to the sports thing, because my husband also, he moved here a few months after me, so he's been here for 3 years. But also, I think the pandemic made it even harder to make friends because it wasn't like you could go out. But now one of his favorite activities that I don't partake in is snowboarding. And so it is a sport and you're not really talking to people while you snowboard, obviously. But he got into like some carpools. And so it's like, oh, we're all driving up to the mountain together or we're going on the bus together. And so he's still working on like it's still like new and he hasn't made any super deep friends, but it's the gateway. There's even though you can't actually talk to each other during the sport, maybe suggest carpools is another idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think setting expectations appropriately is another thing that's really useful, right? Because if you think about something like, having some snowboard buddies
Mm-hmm.
compared to what it took to sort of build your good friends out of school,
Oh yeah, different.
you have like maybe an hour or two. I mean, I don't know how far away the resort is from where you are, but you have a finite amount of time, less than all day, to sort of hang out and talk and interact
Right.
and build up the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in school, you're basically seeing the same people all day, every day, or at least a good chunk of the day,
Right.
or at least every day continuously for a long time.
Yeah.
Or, like with the boot camp that I was in, same people, tons of time together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are, you have to recognize that time is one of the ingredients for building a friendship. So if you only have 1 hour together once a week or 2 hours together once a week, it's going to take a lot longer to build the level of friendship that you're used to from some of these school activities and whatnot, because you just haven't had enough time together. You haven't had enough interactions. You haven't had the ability to build the rapport that you need to feel like, oh, this is a really, really deep and close friend, right? I was just thinking about this the other day because there are some people that we've just recently met that we've been spending a little bit of time with. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it still feels a little bit awkward, like it's still a little weird. And then I think about the amount of time that I spent with my other friends that I'm much closer to before I felt, extremely comfortable with them or whatever else. And it's like, this comparison is not fair at all. This is an absolutely ridiculous comparison. I spent 5 hours with these people. I spent 5 hours with this person in the first day I met them. Like,
right.
So
different.
The expectations around sort of how fast you can develop a really deep relationship has been really important for me, especially like, as I'm moving around, or for anyone who's moved to a new place. Because I think that's when this is the heaviest, is when it's like, I don't know anyone here.
Exactly.
Giving yourself, and it doesn't feel awesome, but giving yourself some space to actually develop these relationships, because it does take time.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And I think it's also important to, if you do have a significant other, to not, I think it's important to have friends outside of your significant other, like your own group of friends. And so it's nice to have like outings with people excluding your significant other from coming along. Like I have both, where it's like, yeah, we can both hang out together as a group, and then we have our own individual friends. Like I haven't met any of his new snowboard friends, and I don't mind. I know it's like, yeah, maybe I will eventually if they become close, but yeah. And I have my people that he knows, but he's not like super close with by any means. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I will echo that sentiment, that I think it's just not realistic to expect that if you're in a couple, have a significant other, or whatever arrangement you have, that your person will be just have the same sort of rapport and chemistry with the other people that I definitely have some friends that I am close with that I just, it's not like they hate each other, but if I left them in a room alone, it'd probably be a pretty awkward conversation, and vice versa, right? Like some of my significant other's friends, if I just had to hang out with them for a whole day, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath. We're gonna try to find something in common to talk about.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think we covered this topic pretty well. Any final thoughts?
No, I think just again, the most useful thing for me making friends as an adult is realizing that the trajectory is just a lot slower because the context is much different. You know, people are
Right.
busier, there's much less time to spend hanging out with people,
Mhm.
but to make it work, you have to keep proactively and mindfully making sure that you are spending time with people and
Mhm.
are allowing those relationships to develop. And I cut off a lot of stuff earlier than I probably should have. And in retrospect, giving it enough space to at least know the person better and then make a decision around like, yeah, no, we've done like 5 or 6, 10 things together, and I just don't want to spend time with them. As opposed to, I met this person for half an hour and I think I know them and I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts about how to build friendships or your stories if you'd like in the comments if you'd like, and spread the happiness in the world. All right. We will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.